Wavelength.
Mental illness doesn't have to be a life sentence.
Alcohol addiction, abuse, misuse is the same all over the globe.
Sparking the combos about Adelaide.
So it made me feel very confident that if we did have it in the state, we were going to know about it.
You should be having.
There'll be guys that are trained, but they don't feel like they're good enough to take their shirt off.
Almost everyone is a culprit of doom scrolling. Anyone who has a mobile phone.
On Fresh 92.7.
Welcome to Wavelength, sparking the combos about Adelaide you should be having. I'm your host, David, and tonight I'm joined by Jamish.
Is that our new nickname?
Yeah. You guys are like Siamese twins. Jamie and Hamish.
Yep.
I like Jamish. I think it works. It rolls off the tongue.
Yeah,
Jamish.
there's something in that.
Hamish, happy birthday,
It
big
is your
boy.
birthday today.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Yes, it is.
Hey, how old are you turning?
Ripe old age of 29, which is a very forgettable number
What a
in a man's
random,
life.
what a random transitional birthday to have.
Yeah.
When you're just about to turn dirty 30s.
Yeah, but you're still technically in your
And you're
20s.
like grasping onto the last leg,
Yeah.
the last leg of your 20s.
Yeah.
But it
I'm
doesn't really count.
technically still in the same bracket as, like 21-year-olds going to town. It feels weird.
You're in the box of, the 25 to 29 box.
Yeah.
So you're still in that. Enjoy that box the last year.
Kind of pathetic,
I'm ready
actually,
to get
Hamish.
out of it, to be honest.
You should just move on. Grow up. Come on, man.
Yeah, I know.
But you
Bloody
sort of rolled in here a bit seedy, though.
Yeah.
What did you get up to
yeah,
last night, dude?
Had a pretty big night last night. It was one for the ages, let's just say that.
On a Sunday.
Yeah, well, it's my birthday, all right? And I do what I want.
All right.
And I'll cry if I want to.
That's it. And I have done that a lot.
I've been crying all
today.
night.
Exactly. Can't you tell? And I woke up this morning with a graze on my knee. And I tell you what, I haven't had a skin knee since I was 12, so that's quite sad.
Oh, yeah, the miscellaneous scabs
Yeah,
where you wake up the
yeah.
next day, or like miscellaneous bruises after
Yeah,
a big night,
yeah.
and you're like, where did you come from?
The marks of shame.
The worst is when
Marks of shame.
they're on your face and you're like, oh, I really actually face planted. That
and you just
wasn't
don't
a
feel
dream.
it. And you didn't feel it because you were just really drunk.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say that, like, normally I'm the one that's like pretty hungover when we record. So I'm happily. Okay, whatever. But I'm happy to pass the baton on to you today. So like,
Thank you so much.
You're welcome anytime. Take
Yay
it away
for
from me
me.
whenever.
Woohoo.
Wow, these amateurs. What do we got on for the show tonight, Jamie?
Well, tonight on Wavelength, are we feeling overwhelmed or don't fully understand everything that's been happening with the devastating Afghanistan War? But don't fret, because Hamish is going to talk us through what's really going on.
We're also going to chat about the OnlyFans fiasco everyone has been hearing about and what their new policies actually mean.
But next, after the Olympic Games wrapped up a few weeks ago, it sparked a once extremely taboo conversation about mental health in sports. We'll be talking all about that next with interviews with an ambassador from the Breakthrough Foundation, a leading research foundation for mental health in sports, and the new SA Mental Health Commissioner. You're listening to Fresh.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. We hope you're having a brilliant Monday.
So some of the world's most elite athletes and gold medalists, might I add, have come forward about the struggles they've experienced and the mental health barriers they've faced whilst competing in the Games. But the conversation doesn't stop at the top. It's actually trickled from the top down, and the conversations have landed right here in Adelaide.
That's right. Jamie, you spoke with Zahn Anthony this week, an elite rugby player here in Adelaide and an ambassador for the Breakthrough Foundation, about her experience with mental health in sports and her role within the organisation.
Wavelength.
After the Olympics this year, it stemmed an extremely important discussion amongst their professional athletes. Mental health in sports. Some of the biggest sporting stars have come forward about their issues with mental health and the pressure and the conditions that they've been facing. For decades, athletes were told to shake it off or toughen up, but the culture's finally starting to change. We've seen winning medalists like Simone Biles, Naomi Osaka, Sha'Carri Richardson and Liz Cambridge come forward about the once taboo topic. But now that these conversations are being had at top level, it's actually starting to influence culture right here in Adelaide. I talk with Zahn Anthony, an elite rugby player and an ambassador for the Breakthrough Foundation, a foundation dedicated to mental health research.
I grew up playing touch football, but as I got older, I moved to Australian rules football. Currently playing in the SANFL for Woodville West Torrens. I'm also an elite rugby sevens player, playing for the Adelaide Roamers, and also in the local rugby 15s comp as well. So it's a bit of everything I can get my hands on. Oval ball sport is life.
Tell me about the Breakthrough Foundation.
I was approached by one of the workers at Breakthrough shortly after I appeared on the TV show You Can't Ask That on ABC. I talked a bit about my history with my own mental health and especially that with an eating disorder and how that related to and affected my sport growing up and even currently now. They recognise that part of getting people on board and getting them to open up and seek help for their own mental health conditions. They kind of needed to hear a voice from the inside and someone who's been through it or was going through it, and to see that there is a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. And if I could help anyone else with my own stories and experiences, and if they can relate to that and take anything out of it, that's enough for me. So I really believe in everything they're doing, since it's the only mental health fundraiser foundation in Australia, which is pretty outstanding when it comes to research specifically around mental health, because clearly we have a lot of strategies like Are You OK Day, but a lot of these intervene a bit too late, whereas the research aspect of Breakthrough Foundation is kind of the point of difference. I know if I had been offered help a bit earlier, I wouldn't have gone down such a severe route myself, and wouldn't have put my family through so much as well. So,
why is it important for athletes to be vocal about their mental health struggles?
Sport itself can be a bit of a metaphor for life. I think, you take out your frustrations on a field, whether that's contact sport or not, it's an outlet. So I think people recognise those parts of themselves in the game or in other athletes. But also part of sport is the community effect. And I think if it takes one person to put their hand up and say, hey, I'm not okay, or I'm not dealing with this very well right now, it makes it real and tangible. And then maybe someone else who's thought, I'm having all these thoughts and there's no one like me. Suddenly there's someone that they can relate to, or maybe someone else put words to feelings that they had, and makes them feel less alone. And I think sport is such a great way, especially in Australia. We love our sports, so it cuts down the middle of a lot of toxic masculinity as well.
So how can we get around this awesome organisation?
At the moment, you can head to the website, social media. You can become a contributor on a fairly regular basis, or Breakthrough also raises money in other ways, in other campaigns throughout the year. Give it a massive follow on social media, especially on Instagram, around Breakthrough Foundation. Just have a look and what they're all about, and have a look at the projects they're looking towards.
That's so incredible. Now, for all the listeners out there, the website is www.breakthroughfoundation.org.au, and the Instagram handle is breakthroughmhr.
Wavelength.
That was Jamie chatting with Zahn Anthony, an elite rugby player from Adelaide and an ambassador for the Breakthrough Foundation.
So anyway, coming up later in the show, I chat with John Mannion, one of the new mental health commissioners here in SA. You're listening to Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength with David, Jamie and Hamish tonight, sparking the combos about Adelaide you should be having.
So this week you've probably heard a lot about Afghanistan, and it's a really complicated topic. So this week Hamish is going to attempt to explain what's been going on over there.
Wavelength.
This week, the world was stunned by the news that the Taliban had seized control of Afghanistan's capital, Kabul, 20 years after they were removed from power. The crisis has naturally prompted many questions, such as who exactly are the Taliban and how did they rise to power so quickly after 2 decades of absence? But there's some other important questions we as a nation must also ask, like what was Australia's involvement in Afghanistan? Was the war we waged on their soil all for nothing? And what can we do for their people now?
And I think this all needs to be looked at. We need to start talking about this today, Pete, you're right. And it needs to be spoken about in Parliament. moment. Don't come back to me in 12 months' time and say, hey, we need to send them over here, because I want to examine where we went wrong here before we do anything else.
That there was Senator Jackie Lambie, who earlier in the week called for an immediate inquiry into our role in Afghanistan throughout the war on terror, which she says is needed to answer questions that have haunted our veterans for years and will continue to do so even more now. It's worth mentioning that this time around, the Taliban's victory is different. There is no resistance left in Afghanistan to oppose their rule anymore. The war is over and the Taliban have won. This means that their total and complete victory in what seemed like no time at all is likely to leave many of those who served in the long and tumultuous campaign questioning why they were sent there and whether they achieved anything at all.
The truth is that when we went into Afghanistan at the end of 2001, there was an overwhelming belief in Australia that it was the right thing to do. And I can say that it did contribute to a situation where what was then feared most did not materialise.
While some veterans may feel their time in service was wasted, former Prime Minister John Howard came out as a vocal supporter of the war he participated in during his active term. He believes the Taliban's rise to power isn't a mark that the mission was a failure, and that Australia's presence in the country stopped further 9/11 style attacks from happening in the West. But Al-Qaeda, the terror group responsible for the Twin Tower attacks, still remains operable. And so does the threat of terrorist attacks. Furthermore, the risk of such attacks surely becomes more tangible under Taliban rule, who were in power when New York was plunged into fire and smoke all those years ago. Mr. Howard also took the time to state that for those Australians who had died in service, their loved ones should find solace in knowing that no soldier ever died in vain. But those might feel like hollow words to the families of those lost in a war that now seems to have achieved very little.
Our policy has not changed. We will be supporting Afghans who have legitimate claims through our official and legitimate processes. We will not be providing that pathway to those who would seek to come any other way.
So what's Australia doing now to help those hoping to flee the newly installed Taliban regime? As of right now, Australia is offering 3,000 spots in its humanitarian visa program. And it's worth noting that this is not in addition to our existing intake. In fact, not much is changing at all despite this growing crisis. There is simply room in our caps, so it will be used, in the words of Prime Minister Scott Morrison. This falls short in how other countries are offering aid, with places like Canada and Britain offering 20,000 additional visas. Human rights group Amnesty International have suggested that we match this number. Our soldiers worked alongside many of these citizens, sourcing their help as interpreters. Some of them even became friends. Now their country is being overtaken by the exact threat we promised to subdue, the threat we based our motivation for invasion on. Surely we, as a country who played such a primary role in this conflict, can do better.
Wavelength.
Absolutely incredible. Thank you so much, Hamish.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear, like, specifically the Australian point of view of our role in the war.
Yeah.
As well. Like, I really liked your point of view there, and how like what will the next 12 months look like? And all of these soldiers would be feeling like, all of these people that have been deployed out there, they would be feeling like, was all of my pain and trauma and like PTSD worth going at all?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Apparently not.
No, apparently
and
not.
all the people who died, for what?
Yeah.
For what?
Yeah, it's hard to reconcile. It really is, especially because, within months or weeks of the US bringing their troops out of Afghanistan, the Taliban were right back at it, taking control of territories and cities almost immediately.
Totally.
And I mean, their takeover was pretty much a bloodless one. Almost a shot wasn't even fired because the Afghan troops over there are so exhausted and so tired from this conflict that they just laid down their arms.
20 years.
It's really, really sad. And as you said, the next 12 months really are very hard to predict. As I said, this time around, it's very, very different. There is no one left to oppose the Taliban anymore. They are most likely going to be in control and in power of Afghanistan for the foreseeable future. Exactly. And the world is going to have to, at some point, grasp that and grapple with that and accept that, as much as we obviously don't want to.
Yeah.
But they will need to be recognised in some form if the world is to cooperate with them or engage with them in any meaningful way.
Thank you so much for the explainer, Hamish.
No, that's
Up next,
right.
you're actually going to let us know all about this week's news as well. You've got a lot on your plate this week.
You've been a busy man, birthday boy.
Happy birthday to me.
29, feeling fine, am I right?
Yeah.
In the meantime, guys, you're listening to Fresh 92.7.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength. Now we're cracking into our weekly segment where Hamish explains what the hell has happened this week.
What the hell is going on this week? Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Well, here we are once again with another week's worth of apocalyptic headlines to pick through. It's like they say, if we don't laugh, we'll cry. The biggest story this week actually knocked COVID off the front pages for once, but the news was equally grim. After 20 years in hiding, the Taliban took back power in Afghanistan in a swift and devastating victory. The news was confirmed when the country's president pulled a ScoMo and fled the capital, although while their leader left them in their greatest time of need under the threat of a hostile takeover, ours just does it for fun. Meanwhile, moving on to COVID news, that didn't take long, did it? Dan Andrews implemented harsh new rules in Victoria in his latest attempt to curb new infections, such as no longer allowing citizens to remove their face masks to have a drink at the pub, which doesn't seem to make sense for obvious reasons. This led to Fox News pundit Tucker Carlson poking fun at Australia and labelling us as peasants. I mean, come on, guys, this is unacceptable. I'm about ready to call a Royal Commission over this. When you've got Fox News making fun of us, it's time to abandon all hope. Fly the white flag and respectfully step down, Dan Andrews. You have now hurt this nation in a way that can never be forgiven. In entertainment news, the Fast and Furious franchise is set to come to an end after a modest 11 entries, with a release date set this week for the penultimate film, and frankly, I'm disappointed. It just feels like there's still so many more ideas they could explore. I mean, they haven't even done a race on Saturn's rings yet, and I think we've all been patiently waiting to watch a high-speed chase at the edge of the observable universe. I think I need to get their producers on the line. Finally, popular social media platform OnlyFans has decided to make a business decision as bad as Blockbuster passing on Netflix by banning porn from its platforms. Isn't that like 90% of their engagement? It's like Playboy deciding to publish only the articles. Apparently, the site is home to a wealth of other content that doesn't involve young girls exposing themselves, but who are they kidding? Even their logo looks like it was made up by the same guys behind Ashley Madison. And that's what the hell has been happening this week.
Wavelength.
Thank you for that, Hamish. Oh, I want to dissect the OnlyFans fiasco because it seems really confusing.
It's so confusing.
What is going on? So essentially they said that they're banning all sexually explicit content to be made by users, but apparently not content creators. Don't know what
What's
the difference is.
What's the difference between a user and a content
Honestly,
creator? That's
who knows?
That's such a grey area.
I assume a user is like someone who pays to
watch, to
but
observe.
It seems like it's going further than that because they actually sort of have to legally ban it because the payment provider MasterCard doesn't want porn. They don't want to be facilitating potentially illegal transactions.
Right, so they're
example,
talking about like revenge porn, or they're talking about like child
porn.
pornography.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think what I heard is that a lot of the problems stem from the fact that there are a lot of people on OnlyFans at the moment who are pretending to be over 18 and actually aren't. So there's, I think the company is realizing that there is probably a big festering problem of potential underage pornography going on, which is a big no-no and a big problem that they obviously don't want on their website. And that might be what the distinction is there between users and content creators. They might need to verify users or vet them in a stricter way.
Well, thank you for that, Hamish. I can't wait for your next week's segment where you talk about Spotify ditching music from its platform.
Spotify doesn't play music anymore. We only abide to content creators, not musicians.
What We got some more music for you guys right now, though. You're listening to Fresh 92.7.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the combos you should be having with David, Jamie and Hamish tonight.
In the second part of our mental health and sports story, I chat with John Mannion, one of the new mental health commissioners here in SA.
Wavelength.
Next, I chat with John Mannion, the new Mental Health Commissioner of South Australia and Executive Director of the Breakthrough Foundation.
Thanks very much for inviting us on today. So my name is John Mannion. I'm the Executive Director for Breakthrough and also one of the new Mental Health Commissioners, of which there are 3 of us. And my background is I've worked in the mental health industry for my whole career. Started off in the northwest of England, where I was a mental health nurse, and then did my social work training over in Manchester, and then 12 years ago moved over here with my family to live in Adelaide, where I worked as the Executive Director for the Clinical Mental Health Services until 6 years ago, when I had the incredible opportunity of being involved in setting Breakthrough Mental Health Research Foundation up, which is a national charity supporting mental health research that's based here in Adelaide.
So you were appointed the role of Mental Health Commissioner of SA earlier this year. What exactly does that job entail?
Yeah, so I actually started in the position about 6 weeks ago. So really still working through in a very, very new role. The role and function of the Mental Health Commissioners, though, is to provide clear guidance and advice to the Minister for Mental Health and Wellbeing, representing the sort of voice of the local community, the South Australian community, so that we can ensure that access to our mental health services is smooth, it's streamlined, and also that we're able to develop new services and systems to actually meet the ever-changing sort of landscape for mental health. So we know that we're really encouraging people to open up more. We're encouraging people to feel strong enough to actually share their stories. And what we want to do is ensure that we then have a responsive service and a system that can actually help during those periods of time of crisis or trauma, or of just that wishing to understand more about what's happening to us. The mental health conversation, I would say, has never been as strong now as it has throughout my whole career. The challenge we face, though, is are we listening? Are we listening to what's being said to us? Are we able then to adapt and provide education and growth within our communities and empower our communities to start to take some control from that early intervention and prevention perspective, so that we reduce the time that people perhaps then need to actually reach out and require hospitalisation or more intensive interventions. So the conversation is very, very, very strong. People, though, are in the community are asking us, can you give us new skills? Can we have further education? Can we have opportunities to actually look at how we develop our communities to look after our mental health and wellbeing? And this is why it links beautifully into our sport and mental health theme.
You're also the Executive Director of Breakthrough. So why is this organisation so important?
Breakthrough was important because we were the first foundation that was set up here in Australia that invests in mental health research. We know that 1 in 5 people have a diagnosed mental health issue. But we also know there's more than that are actually still struggling to put their hand up, to reach out for help because of the stigma and discrimination that's associated, but also because a lot of people still feel, who can actually understand what's happening to me? How can they truly understand what I actually need? What interventions are actually there? We wanted to look at investing into research for eating disorders, younger people, mental health, Indigenous mental health and depression, because they're 4 of the strong and great strengths that our local universities actually have. And we wanted to invest in our local universities to actually drive that change.
And even the Olympics really set a tone for creating a safe space to talk about mental health in sports. Do you think that there's a direct correlation with mental health and sports?
I think, what we saw in the Olympics with athletes actually putting their hand up to say, I actually need some time out. This is really, really difficult. This is a real challenge. There's a whole range of expectations put on me to actually perform at a high level. They're the same thoughts, feelings and transitions every one of us goes through. And that might be through our workplace, it might be through our relationships, it might be through our education. And so I think the way in which sporting arena has actually then raised this profile has actually been really important. We know that here in South Australia that sport is very, very important. We know it's a central point for most of our communities, and especially our rural communities. It's a place where people can come together with a common understanding and a common connectivity. What we also know that sports clubs actually provide a great sense of purpose and a sense of belonging for most of our community. And they're 2 foundations of positive mental health and wellbeing. So what we've been looking at here at Breakthrough in relation to the Breakthrough Community Sports Round was really trying to find a way in which we utilise that sporting community as the vehicle to make a mental health conversation safe, to actually empower the community to have that conversation and empower the clubs to know what things to look out for in their family, their friends and their colleagues, but also to have the skills on how to actually have a safe mental health conversation.
Wavelength.
That there was Jamie chatting with John Mannion, one of the new mental health commissioners here in SA, and also from Breakthrough, the executive director.
Yeah,
wow.
It was a really, really cool interview. He's a really great guy. And I think it was just, I mean, I didn't even know we had a mental health commissioner of South Australia, let alone 3. So, like, props to that.
Could
but also,
me.
yeah, right. where have you guys been the past year? No, it was really nice to talk to someone that genuinely cared about mental health. And it's cool to see someone in politics batting for mental health that actually cares, where it's not just like some politician that's been like slapped with a label of being the mental health commissioner that doesn't give a crap.
Mm-hmm.
But he's got like 30 plus experience, like years experience working in mental health research as a nurse. Like, it's just cool. Like, it's just nice to see that there's people out there that care.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. It's very refreshing, and it's nice to see that, as you said, it's not just some token role that's just been created to appease a certain section of voters like yourself.
Totally.
And it is actually there to achieve something real.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Jamie. And that is 2 amazing interviews anyway. We've still got plenty of Wavelength left for you guys tonight, though, so stay tuned. You're listening to Fresh.
Wavelength.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the combos about Adelaide you should be having.
Okay, so I want to talk about the anti-lockdown protests that have been happening in the country this week.
I know. I mean, I wish I could be surprised. I mean, last week
I
did that segment talking about how I was getting the vaccine. Got it on Friday. Felt amazing.
Yeah.
No side effects, just a sore arm.
Love that.
Go get it. 100% vouch for it.
So you're telling me I can't use you for my internet connection?
I don't know.
Are you microchipped yet? No.
My phone is saying 5G.
We ruffled some feathers though. We got a lot of texts, angry texts on the line from anti-vaxxers.
Jimmy's were rustled.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I wish I could be surprised that these anti-lockdown protests happen in Adelaide, where we are not in lockdown.
Well,
I know. It
like
was
yesterday and Saturday in Ramal Park, right? Like
Yeah, really?
Hundreds of people.
What?
Yep.
Why?
dozens of them.
My friend works at the Stag across the road, and she was like, it was crazy to see, because she was like, they were literally wearing Trump hats, and they were like,
What in Adelaide?
What are you
doing?
It was just this really mixed bag of people.
Any more stereotypical?
I know.
Yeah, we
but-
did get some weird texts in though, which is what
It
doesn't
was a
surprise
bit-
me that they happened.
Yeah, it was a bit weird, wasn't it? It was a bit concerning. But you know what? I was just happy to see that people were listening to the show, to be honest.
Yeah, thanks,
I
guys.
was like, woo, sick.
We'll take anyone listening to the show.
That's the most traffic we've ever had on the text line on this show, so maybe we should bring it up more.
Yeah, totally. It's interesting to, like, if you look at all of the protests happening in Australia, like Sydney, they had 1,400 police officers come in to enforce.
How many? 1,400?
Yeah, I saw this video of like all of these police officers running down, and I was like, is this necessary? But another thing that the Sydney government did, which I'd really like to get your opinion on, is they actually the government stopped taxis and Ubers from driving around the city so people could not get to the protest.
Yeah.
Look, that is weird to me.
Well, that, like, if you're pro protest in general, which I am, let's say at blanket rule I am, to like enforce these rules so people can't, like, regardless of what we're protesting.
Yeah.
Not saying that it's great.
It's a bad precedent.
It sits weirdly with me.
Yeah.
So that I actually don't know how I feel if that's right.
But I understand in the context because Sydney is in a lockdown. They're not meant to be going outside the house for more than an hour.
They're gonna get they're gonna reach 900 cases.
It's one of those weird things where you don't want to repress people's right to protest, but you also have a duty of care for the public's health.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's where there is this really weird
it's a grey area,
conflict
isn't it?
going on that's very hard to reconcile. And I agree with you. You know, as in general, I am someone that definitely believes in the right to protest, regardless of how stupid that protest or that cause might be.
Totally.
But also, I think, you know, looking at Victoria, they've obviously been doing the same thing as well over there.
They had a lot of protests on the
Melbourne
weekend.
They had a lot of
been some
protesting
violence.
as well. And
there's been lots of violence, which is quite sad to see.
Sydney, I find it a lot harder to be sympathetic towards.
Yeah.
But Victoria, you know, you do look at it and you go, man, they must be so over it.
Yeah.
You know, like they really
year.
must be so exhausted
They
and
literally
so sick of this shit, really, to be honest. So I can sympathise, I can empathise, I get it. It's it must be crushing.
Well, I was researching on like the theme throughout history of protesting, and there's been a really common theme throughout history of circumstances around vaccine resistance. So like in the US in the 20s, there was this huge anti-vaccination activism movement.
Right.
And that's happened throughout history. So it's not, whilst it's surprising and jarring and abrasive, it's not uncommon.
Anti-vaxxers have been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm with you, Hamish. I understand Melbourne people protesting at this point. It's been 200 days. I would be absolutely fed up with Dan Andrews if I lived there.
Exactly.
I
and then he comes out and, like I said earlier, implemented those new rules where you can't remove your mask to have a drink at the pub, which makes zero sense.
It's so paternalistic.
Just
Why
like-
would
You
don't need your...
Just imagining someone pouring a beer into their mask.
Yeah.
Trying to drink it through like a
just
filtration.
allowing it to soak
It's
through.
the final stages of brewing.
Gets rid of all the sediment.
Totally.
You really don't need your premier to be your dad. Anyway.
No, anyway. You're listening to Fresh 92.7.
Wavelength.
Anyway, that brings us to the end of the show tonight. Thank you guys for listening.
Now make sure you're subscribed to the Wavelength podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else that you get your podcasts. You can listen back to our old episodes right now and you'll be the first to know when tonight's episode goes up.
That's right. What have we got on the show next week, Jamie?
Next week we've got a show about the arts, my favourite thing. So we're actually, I interviewed an actor and a director from Hibernation, which is the newest play from the State Theatre Company.
Yeah, go ahead and go see that while you've got the chance, I reckon, guys.
Fund the arts, which I call farts. So get your farts on, guys.
Get your farts on?
Support the arts. Sorry.
I'm speechless.
That was a span in the
I
works.
don't know what to say.
It's not very often that you guys become speechless.
I
And
know.
it was about
Yeah,
farts.
yeah,
Out of
well
everything
done.
I say,
Yeah.
I'll take that. I'll take that on board.
Thanks for joining me this week, Jamie and Hamish.
No problem.
Oh, Jamish, if you will.
Jamish.
Happy
that's
birthday,
right.
Hamish.
Thank
Happy
you very
birthday again.
much.
We'll see you guys next Monday. But up next, we've got Deep with Easy G. You're listening to Fresh.
Wavelength.